The Ancient Warning. The stone monument stood 12 feet tall in the center of the Vextai capital, its surface covered in symbols from dozens of different civilizations. Most citizens walked past it without a second glance, considering it just another piece of ancient decoration from their empire's many conquests. But Commander Zethkar had always been curious about the strange writing that seemed to repeat the same message in language after language. Today, he finally had time to investigate. The Vextai were a proud species, standing nearly 8 feet tall with crystalline scales that reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. Their empire stretched across 47 star systems, each world brought under their control through superior military might and strategic brilliance. They were warriors, conquerors, and they had never met a species they couldn't defeat. Zethkar ran his clawed fingers along the ancient inscriptions, his translator device working overtime to decode the various languages. The first few were simple warnings about respecting galactic law, maintaining peace between species, and honoring trade agreements. Standard diplomatic nonsense from the old Galactic Council that had dissolved centuries ago. But then he found the human inscription. The symbols were strange, angular, and when translated, they sent a chill down his spine despite the warm afternoon sun. The message was simple, carved deep into the stone in what his translator identified as multiple human languages. There is one species in this galaxy that all others must remember. They call themselves humans. They inhabit a blue world in the Orion Arm. The rule is simple: leave them alone. Do not attack them. Do not threaten them. Do not test them. This is not a request. This is not a suggestion. This is a warning from those who came before. The humans are not what they seem. Below that, in smaller text, was an addition that seemed to have been carved later. They do not start wars. They finish them. Zethkar stepped back, his scales rippling with amusement. Humans? He had heard of them, of course, a young species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They had been expanding slowly, carefully, establishing a few colonies here and there. Nothing impressive. Nothing that suggested they were anything more than another primitive species taking their first steps into the galaxy. The idea that such creatures warranted a warning was laughable. He activated his communication device and contacted his aide. Lieutenant Vexara, I need you to pull all available data on the species called humans. Humans, sir? The bipedal mammals from the Orion Arm? The very same. I want to know everything about them. Military capabilities, technology level, population centers, everything. Right away, Commander. Within an hour, Zethkar had his answer, and it only reinforced his amusement. The humans had a modest fleet of ships, basic energy weapons, and simple defensive systems. Their colonies were lightly defended, relying more on their isolation than any impressive military might. They seemed to prefer diplomacy over conflict, often going to great lengths to avoid confrontation with other species. They were, by all accounts, harmless. That evening, Zethkar presented his findings to the War Council. The assembled Vextai officers listened with growing interest as he described the ancient warning and the species it concerned. You're telling us, said General Kexmore, the Empire's supreme military commander, that our ancestors carved a warning about these humans? Not just our ancestors, Zethkar replied. Every major species that was part of the old Galactic Council. The warning appears in Zephyrian, ancient Korthak, even old ethereal script. Someone wanted to make sure this message survived. And yet, another officer interjected, these humans appear to be nothing special. Weak ships, basic weapons, small populations spread thin across their colonies. General Kexmore's scales shifted to a deep purple, indicating deep thought. Perhaps that's exactly why they were able to convince others to carve this warning. Deception through appearance of weakness. Or, suggested another council member, the warning was carved by species that were themselves weak, trying to protect these humans from proper conquest. The room erupted in discussion, but Zethkar found himself staring at a holographic display of human space. There was something about their expansion pattern that bothered him. It wasn't random, nor was it the typical aggressive spread of a young spacefaring civilization. It was methodical, almost careful, as if they were deliberately avoiding, "I propose a test," he said, and the room fell silent. General Kexmore leaned forward. What kind of test? A small one, nothing that could be considered a full invasion. We select one of their remote colonies, conduct a limited strike, and observe their response. If they're truly dangerous, we'll learn why. If they're not, he gestured dismissively. And if this warning exists for a reason we don't understand? Zethkar's scales shifted to confident gold. Then we retreat and respect the ancient wisdom. But I believe we'll find that fear and superstition carved those words, not experience. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the War Council reached a consensus. They would conduct a limited test of human capabilities, nothing too aggressive, just enough to provoke a response and measure their true strength. The target they selected was New Eden, an agricultural colony on the edge of human space with a population of just over 10,000. It was defended by a single orbital platform and what appeared to be a small ground-based militia, perfect for their purposes. 3 days later, a small Vextai task force consisting of 2 light cruisers and a support vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Eden system. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching the peaceful blue-green world spin slowly on the main screen. "Sir," reported his sensor officer, "we're detecting the expected defenses. 1 orbital station, minimal weapons. We're also picking up what appears to be a farming settlement on the northern continent. Any military response to our arrival?" "Negative, sir, although we are receiving a communication request." Zethkar's interest peaked. "Put it through." The screen flickered and suddenly he was looking at a human female. She appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with short dark hair streaked with gray and calm brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore what looked like civilian clothing, but something about her posture suggested military training. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen, coordinator of New Eden Colony Defense," she said in accented galactic standard. "You're in human space without permission. Please state your intentions." Zethkar studied her face, looking for signs of fear or panic. Instead, he saw only a careful watchfulness that reminded him uncomfortably of a predator evaluating a threat. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Vextai Empire," he replied. "We're conducting a survey of this region. Your cooperation would be appreciated." Something flickered across the human's expression, too quick for him to interpret. "I see. And this survey requires 2 armed cruisers?" "Standard precautions." "Of course." Sarah Chen was quiet for a moment, then continued. "Commander, are you familiar with galactic history, specifically the warnings left by the old council?" Zethkar felt his scales tighten with surprise. "You know about the warnings?" "We know about all of them," she said simply. "The question is, do you?" Before he could respond, his tactical officer called out urgently. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the colony. They're powering something big." On the screen, Sarah Chen smiled, and for the first time since arriving in the system, Zethkar felt genuinely unsettled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something he didn't. "Commander," she said, "I'm going to give you the same advice that Warning gave you. Leave, now, while you still can." "Are you threatening us?" Zethkar demanded, his scales shifting to aggressive red. "No," Sarah Chen replied calmly. "I'm trying to save your life." The transmission ended. Zethkar stared at the blank screen, then turned to his tactical officer. "Report! The energy reading is continuing to climb, sir. It's coming from multiple points across the colony. But, sir, these readings don't match any known human technology." "Explain." "The power output is significant, much higher than we expected from a simple farming colony. And, sir, I'm detecting movement in the outer system. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace." Zethkar's confidence began to waver. "How many contacts?" 12. "No, 15. Sir, they're still coming. I count 23 vessels now, and they're moving fast." "Human vessels?" "Unknown, sir. They're not matching any ship types in our database." On the main screen, New Eden continued to spin peacefully, but now Zethkar could see bright points of light beginning to appear on the surface. The orbital station, which had seemed almost defenseless, was suddenly bristling with weapons he hadn't noticed before. "Sir," his communications officer called out nervously, "we're receiving another transmission. It's not from the colony. Put it through." This time, the face that appeared on screen was ancient and weathered, belonging to a species Zethkar recognized as Morthok, one of the oldest races in the galaxy. The being's 6 eyes regarded him with something that might have been pity. "Young Vextai," the elder said in a voice like grinding stone, "you have made a terrible mistake." "Elder Morthok," Zethkar said, fighting to keep his voice steady, "what are you doing in Human space? Trying to prevent a catastrophe that your pride has set in motion, the elder replied. Do you know why the warning was carved, young warrior? Enlighten me. The elder's eyes dimmed with old sorrow. Because 500 years ago, my people made the same mistake you're making now. We thought the humans were weak. We thought the warning was meant to protect them from us. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was barely above a whisper. We were wrong. What happened? We learned why the warning exists, and now, because you couldn't leave well enough alone, you're about to learn too. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar staring at his reflection in the dark screen. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to make sense of the impossible readings they were getting from what should have been a simple farming colony. Sir, his sensor officer called out, voice tight with fear, I'm reading massive structures rising from the planet's surface. They were hidden underground. What kind of structures? Defense platforms, sir, big ones. And sir, they're targeting us. Zethkar looked at the main screen where New Eden had transformed before his eyes. What had appeared to be a peaceful agricultural world was now bristling with weapons that could have defended a fortress world. The orbital station had deployed additional sections that had been hidden within its structure, revealing itself to be 3 times larger than they had initially thought, and still more ships continued to arrive at the edge of the system. Commander, his first officer said quietly, perhaps we should consider retreat. Zethkar's pride warred with his growing fear. Everything he thought he knew about humans was proving to be wrong, but he was Vextai. He was a warrior of the Empire. He couldn't simply run from a farming colony, no matter how surprisingly well defended it might be. Negative, he said, trying to project more confidence than he felt. We came here to test their capabilities. Let's see what they're truly capable of. It was a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. As if responding to his thoughts, Sarah Chen's voice came over the communication system one final time. Commander Zethkar, she said, and there was genuine sadness in her voice now. You should have heeded the warning. The first shots were fired 30 seconds later, and Commander Zethkar discovered exactly why his ancestors had carved that message in stone, the test that became a nightmare. The first thing Commander Zethkar noticed was that the humans didn't fire a warning shot. The defensive platforms that had risen from New Eden's surface didn't send a beam across his ship's bow or target his engines to disable his vessel. They aimed for his weapon systems with surgical precision, and their first volley stripped away 60% of his offensive capabilities in the span of 3 seconds. Damage report, he barked, gripping his command chair as his ship shuddered under the impact. Forward particle cannons are gone, sir. Missile tubes 1 through 6 are offline. They're targeting our weapons specifically. Zethkar's scales shifted to deep purple. In 40 years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy that showed such restraint combined with such devastating accuracy. Every species he had ever fought either went for the kill immediately or issued warnings before attacking. This precise dismantling of his ship's offensive capabilities was something entirely new. Return fire! Target those defense platforms! His remaining weapons lanced out toward the planet's surface, but where he expected to see explosions and debris, he instead watched his energy beams dissipate harmlessly against some kind of shielding system that hadn't been there moments before. Sir, the platforms are protected by adaptive shielding. Our weapons aren't penetrating. What about the orbital station? Also shielded, sir. But Commander, I think they're letting us target it. Zethkar turned to stare at his tactical officer. Letting us? Sir, my targeting systems are having no trouble locking onto the station, but every shot we fire is being absorbed or deflected. It's like they want us to waste our ammunition. Before Zethkar could respond, his communications officer spoke up nervously. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from one of the approaching vessels. Put it through. The face that appeared on screen was distinctly human, but unlike Sarah Chen's calm demeanor, this individual radiated barely controlled fury. He was younger, with short blonde hair and bright blue eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. This is Captain Marcus Webb of the research vessel Curiosity, the human said, his voice deadly quiet. You just attacked civilians. This is a military operation, Zethkar replied, trying to maintain some authority in the situation. We are testing your defenses. Your defenses. Testing. Marcus Webb repeated the word like it tasted bitter. You decided to test human defenses by attacking a farming colony. Your colony appears to be far from defenseless. Of course it's not defenseless, Webb's voice rose slightly. Did you think we'd send families to live on a frontier world without protection? What kind of monsters do you think we are? Zethkar felt something cold settle in his stomach. He was beginning to realize that his fundamental assumptions about humanity had been completely wrong. However, Webb continued, his voice dropping back to that dangerous quiet, the question now is what we do about your little test. We propose to continue our evaluation, Zethkar said, though even as he spoke the words, he knew how foolish they sounded. Webb's expression didn't change, but somehow his smile became terrifying. Oh, Commander, you misunderstand. The test is over. You failed. Now comes the education. The transmission ended, and immediately Zethkar's ship was bracketed by energy beams from the approaching human vessels. But like the shots from the planetary defenses, these beams weren't trying to destroy his ship. They were systematically disabling every system except life support and communications. Sir, his engineering officer called out, they're using some kind of selective electromagnetic pulse. It's targeting our specific systems without damaging the hull. How is that possible? I don't know, sir. It's like they know our ship's design better than we do. Zethkar was about to respond when his sensor officer gasped. Sir, you need to see this. On the main screen, the image of New Eden had been replaced by a tactical display showing the surrounding space. What Zethkar saw made his blood freeze. The 23 ships they had initially detected had grown to over 60 vessels, and they were arranged in a perfect sphere around his small task force. But that wasn't what terrified him. What terrified him was that he recognized the formation. It was a classic Vextai encirclement pattern, one of their most advanced tactical maneuvers that took years to master. Somehow, the humans had not only learned it but executed it flawlessly. How do they know our tactics? He whispered. His first officer, a seasoned warrior named Kex Tool, studied the display with growing alarm. Sir, that's not just our encirclement pattern. Look at the spacing, the positioning of their support vessels. They're using the Korthak variant we developed after studying the Battle of Zerion Prime. That battle was classified, Zethkar said numbly. The tactical data was never shared outside the War Council. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. We're being hailed by the planet again. Sarah Chen's face reappeared on screen, but now she was clearly standing in what looked like a military command center. Behind her, Zethkar could see dozens of humans working at various stations, their movements efficient and purposeful. Commander, she said, I hope you're beginning to understand your situation. How do you know our military tactics? He demanded. The same way we know about the warnings your ancestors left, she replied calmly. We pay attention, we learn, we remember. That's impossible. Those tactics are classified? Yes, we know. Just like we know about the Drekken offensive you're planning for next year, and the way you modified your shield harmonics after the encounter with the Zephyrian raiders 6 months ago. Zethkar felt his world tilt. The information she was casually mentioning was among the most closely guarded secrets in the Vextai Empire. You're spies, he accused. Sarah Chen actually laughed. Commander, we're not spies, we're humans. Do you know what that means? Tell me. It means we don't just observe. We don't just learn, we understand. When your people conquered the Drekken system, we studied how you did it. When you fought the Zephyrians, we analyzed every engagement. When you developed new tactics, we figured out how to counter them. Why? Because that's what humans do, she said simply. We prepare for every possibility, even the ones we hope never happen. On his tactical display, Zethkar watched more human ships arrive. They were coming from all directions now, and he realized with growing horror that they weren't just random vessels responding to a distress call. This was a coordinated response, planned and executed with military precision. How many ships do you have? He asked quietly. How many do we need? Sarah Chen replied. It was then that Zethkar understood the true meaning of the ancient warning. It wasn't about human military might or advanced technology. It was about something far more dangerous, human nature itself. Sir, his first officer whispered urgently, we should surrender. Zethkar's pride rebelled against the suggestion, but his tactical mind was already calculating the odds. His task force was outnumbered, 20-1, completely surrounded and facing an enemy that somehow knew more about Vextai military doctrine than most Vextai officers. You want us to surrender to farmers? He hissed. Sir, I don't think they're just farmers. Before Zethkar could respond, another voice came over the communications system. This one was older, more authoritative, and when the face appeared on screen, Zethkar recognized the insignia of a human fleet admiral. Commander Zethkar, I'm Admiral Patricia Hayes, Earth Defense Force. I'm currently en route to your position with additional vessels. More ships? Zethkar asked weakly. Commander, when you decided to test a human colony, you sent a message that reached every human settlement within 50 light years. Did you really think we wouldn't respond? This was meant to be a limited engagement. There's no such thing as a limited engagement when you attack human civilians, Admiral Hayes said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You wanted to test us, Commander. Congratulations, you're about to see what humans are capable of when we're properly motivated. The transmission ended and Zethkar found himself staring at a tactical display that showed the impossible. Human ships were still arriving, not in dozens now, but in hundreds. They were coming from directions his sensors said were empty space, appearing as if from nowhere with coordinated precision that spoke of long-term planning and preparation. Sir? His sensor officer said in a voice barely above a whisper. I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the system. The humans. They've been here all along. What do you mean? Stealth platforms, sir. Hidden bases. Cloaked ships. Commander, this entire system is a fortress. We never saw it because they didn't want us to see it. Zethkar slumped in his command chair, finally understanding the full scope of his mistake. He hadn't stumbled into a simple farming colony. He had walked into a carefully prepared trap, one that had been waiting for exactly this kind of test. Sir, his communications officer said nervously, General Kexmore is calling from the fleet. Zethkar straightened. His commander would be wondering why a simple probe of human defenses was taking so long. Put him through. General Kexmore's face appeared on screen, his scales already shifting to angry red. Commander, report. Why haven't you completed your assessment of the human colony? Sir, Zethkar began, then stopped. How could he explain what was happening? How could he tell his superior that their simple test had awakened something that defied every assumption they had made about humanity? Sir, he finally said, I respectfully request immediate reinforcements, full battle group strength. General Kexmore's scales shifted to surprised yellow. For a farming colony? General, with respect, this is not a farming colony. This is... He paused, searching for the right words. This is why the warning exists. The silence that followed was broken by the voice of Sarah Chen as she came back online. General Kexmore, she said, somehow knowing the Vextai commander was listening. My name is Captain Sarah Chen. I believe you and I need to have a conversation. I don't negotiate with subordinates, the general growled. Then perhaps you'd prefer to speak with someone of appropriate rank, Sarah Chen replied calmly. One moment, please. The screen flickered, and suddenly Zethkar found himself looking at a human male in an elaborate military uniform. His hair was silver with age, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of a career strategist. General Kexmore, the human said formally, I'm Fleet Admiral Chen Wei, Sarah's father and commanding officer of the Human Defense Coalition. I believe we need to discuss the current situation before it escalates beyond anyone's ability to control. Zethkar watched his superior's scales shift through several colors as the implications sank in. The farming colony's defense coordinator was the daughter of humanity's supreme military commander, and if she was here... How many humans know about this test? General Kexmore asked quietly. All of them, Admiral Chen replied simply. Commander, your species prides itself on military excellence. Let me share something with you about human military doctrine. We don't just defend our colonies. We defend the idea that our colonies should never need defending. Meaning? Meaning that when you attacked New Eden, you didn't just attack 10,000 farmers, General. You attacked the concept that human families should be safe anywhere in the galaxy. Admiral Chen's expression remained calm, but something in his eyes made Zethkar's scales contract with instinctive fear. And that, General, is something we take very personally indeed. The tactical display updated again, showing that human ships now outnumbered the Vextai task force by more than 50-1. But Zethkar was beginning to realize that the numbers didn't matter. What mattered was what those numbers represented. Every ship that had responded to the attack on New Eden carried families, communities, entire civilizations worth of people who had decided that the Vextai test was unacceptable. And if humans were capable of this level of coordination and preparation for a simple farming colony, General, Zethkar said quietly into his communicator, I respectfully suggest we withdraw immediately. Withdraw? From farmers? No, sir, Zethkar replied, finally understanding what he was truly facing. From humans. And in that moment, as he watched hundreds of human ships position themselves with tactical precision that his own people couldn't match, Commander Zethkar finally comprehended why every species in the ancient Galactic Council had felt compelled to carve the same warning into stone. The humans weren't just dangerous because they were strong. They were dangerous because they were human. Part 3. Why the warning existed. The reinforcements General Kexmore sent arrived 12 hours later, and Commander Zethkar watched them drop out of hyperspace with a growing sense of dread. The general had dispatched the 3rd Battle Fleet, 47 vessels including 2 heavy cruisers and the flagship Dominion's Edge. It was enough firepower to conquer a medium-sized star system. Against the human response, it looked pitiful. Sir, his sensor officer reported in a hollow voice, human ships now number over 800, and they're still arriving. Zethkar no longer bothered to respond to such reports. The numbers had stopped making sense hours ago. What had begun as a simple test of a farming colony had somehow triggered the largest military mobilization he had ever witnessed, and it was all directed at his small task force. The communication from General Kexmore came immediately. Zethkar, what in the name of the ancestors is happening here? My tactical display shows nearly 1,000 enemy vessels. They're not enemy vessels, sir, Zethkar said wearily. They're just human vessels, and they're here because we attacked New Eden. A farming colony shouldn't have this kind of support. Sir, with respect, I don't think anything about humans is what we expected it to be. On the main screen, Admiral Chen Wei's face appeared again, but now he was joined by several other humans. Zethkar recognized the insignia of multiple fleet commands representing different human colonies and settlements. What he was seeing was unprecedented, a species-wide military coordination that had been activated by a single incident. General Kexmore, Admiral Chen said formally, I'm going to be very direct with you. You have 2 choices. You can withdraw your forces immediately and we can discuss this incident through diplomatic channels. Or you can escalate this situation and learn why our ancestors left warnings about us. Our ancestors left warnings because they were afraid, General Kexmore replied, his pride clearly stung by the implied threat. No, said a new voice, and Elder Morthak appeared on the screen alongside the human commanders. We left warnings because we were wise. The ancient being's 6 eyes focused on General Kexmore with the weight of centuries. Young Vextai, you ask why the warnings exist. Let me tell you the story that your military historians chose not to record. Zethkar leaned forward despite himself. The elder's tone carried the authority of absolute truth. 500 years ago, my people, the Morthak Collective, were the dominant military power in this region of space. We had conquered 14 systems, subjugated 6 species, and believed ourselves unbeatable. Like you, we discovered the humans during their early expansion period. Like you, we saw primitive ships, basic weapons, and scattered colonies. The elder paused, his expression growing dark with memory. We decided to test them, just as you have done. We attacked a single human outpost on the edge of their territory, a mining station with perhaps 500 inhabitants. What happened? General Kexmore asked, though his voice suggested he already dreaded the answer. We learned what humans truly are, Elder Morthak replied. The mining station's defense coordinator was a female named Commander Elizabeth Santos. When our ships arrived, she sent a single message to her people. They made it personal. Zethkar felt his scales tighten. The phrasing was almost identical to what Admiral Chen had said earlier. Within 6 hours, 17 human ships had arrived at that system. Within 12 hours, over 100. By the end of the first day, we faced more than 300 human vessels, all because we had attacked a single mining platform. Impossible, General Kexmore breathed. We thought so too, the elder continued. We had studied their expansion, their technology, their apparent military capabilities. Nothing suggested they possessed such vast fleets or could coordinate such a response. We were wrong about everything. Admiral Chen spoke up. Elder Morthak, if I may add some context, the mining station your people attacked was home to the families of 3 different human settlements. When you targeted civilians, you weren't just attacking one outpost. You were threatening children, parents, grandparents from multiple communities. And humans, added another voice as a new figure appeared on screen, don't handle threats to their families very well. This speaker was clearly military, but unlike the others, she wore the uniform of what Zethkar's database identified as human special forces. Her name tag read Santos J. Commander Santos, Admiral Chen said respectfully. Would you like to tell them about your great-grandmother? Elizabeth Santos was my great-grandmother, Commander Santos said simply. She died defending that mining station 500 years ago, but not before she sent a message that every human settlement received. What message? Zethkar asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. She said, if they can reach us here, they can reach anyone anywhere. This ends now. Elder Morthak's voice carried centuries of regret. What we had interpreted as an attack on a single outpost, the humans saw as a threat to their entire species. Commander Santos's message didn't just call for help, it called for a demonstration that such attacks would never be tolerated again. The battle lasted 3 days, Admiral Chen continued. By the end, the Morthak forces were completely defeated. But that wasn't the end of it. What do you mean? General Kexmore asked. The humans didn't stop with defeating the attacking fleet, Elder Morthak said quietly. They traced the attack back to its origin. They identified every ship that had participated, every command structure that had authorized it, every supply depot that had supported it. Zethkar felt cold dread creeping up his spine. And then? They systematically dismantled our entire military infrastructure, Elder Morthak continued. Not through destruction, but through understanding. Within 6 months, they had analyzed every aspect of our technology, our tactics, our supply chains. They didn't just defeat us in battle, General. They made it impossible for us to ever threaten anyone again. How? General Kexmore's voice was barely a whisper. Commander Santos leaned forward. My great-grandmother's final message wasn't just a call for help. It was a directive that became part of human military doctrine. Learn everything about them. Understand how they think, how they fight, how they supply themselves. Make sure this never happens to anyone else. You turned military intelligence into a science, Zethkar realized. We turned survival into a science, Admiral Chen corrected. Every species that has ever threatened human civilians has found themselves facing the same response. We don't just defend against attacks. We ensure they can't happen again. Elder Morthak's ancient eyes reflected deep sorrow. The humans offered us a choice after our defeat. We could surrender completely and accept their oversight of our military development, or we could face total economic and technological isolation from the rest of the galaxy. What did you choose? We chose wisdom, the elder replied. We accepted their terms, and in doing so, we learned something remarkable. The humans didn't want to conquer us. They wanted to understand us. They studied our culture, our history, our motivations. They helped us find ways to channel our military instincts into exploration and scientific advancement instead of conquest. Today, Admiral Chen added, the Morthak Collective is one of our closest allies. Their exploration fleets have discovered 17 new star systems in the past century. Their scientists work alongside ours on projects that benefit the entire galaxy. General Kexmore was silent for a long moment. And if we choose to fight? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Finally, a new voice answered, and when Zethkar saw who was speaking, his scales went completely white. It was a Vextai. General Kexmore, the figure said in their own language. My name is Commander Velkar. I serve aboard the human vessel Harmony. You serve humans? General Kexmore's voice cracked with disbelief. I serve alongside humans, Velkar corrected. My grandfather was part of a Vextai raid on a human research station 30 years ago. Like you, our leaders thought humans were weak and unprepared. Like you, they learned otherwise. What happened to your grandfather? He survived, Velkar said simply. The humans captured his entire raiding force without killing a single Vextai warrior. Instead of executing them as pirates, they offered them a choice: face prosecution under galactic law, or spend 5 years learning about human society and culture. Zethkar found his voice. And he chose to learn? He chose to understand. For 5 years, my grandfather lived among humans. He worked alongside their farmers, their engineers, their teachers. He learned about their families, their hopes, their fears. And at the end of those 5 years, he was offered another choice. which was? He could return to Vex-Tai space, or he could stay and help build something better. He chose to stay. He became a bridge between our species, helping other Vex-Tai understand what humans truly represent. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. Commander Velkar's grandfather wasn't the only one. Over the decades, we've had similar encounters with dozens of species. Some choose to learn, others choose isolation. But all of them eventually understand why the warnings exist. Because you're conquerors, General Kexmore said bitterly. No, Elder Morthak replied firmly. Because they're builders. The humans don't conquer species, General. They transform the reasons why conquest seems necessary in the first place. Commander Santos spoke up again. General, let me ask you something. Why did you attack New Eden? To test human military capabilities. But why did you feel the need to test us? General Kexmore hesitated. Because the warning suggested you were dangerous. And why does that matter to the Vex-Tai Empire? The question struck at the heart of Vex-Tai military doctrine. Because dangerous species are potential threats to our expansion. And why do you need to expand? For resources, territory, strategic advantage? And why do you need those things? General Kexmore paused, clearly thinking through the implications of the question. For the security and prosperity of our people. Exactly, Admiral Chen said gently. You attacked us because you were afraid that we might threaten your people's safety and prosperity. But General, have humans ever attacked Vex-Tai territory? Have we ever interfered with your trade routes or resource gathering? No, the General admitted reluctantly. Have we ever threatened your colonies or your civilians? No. Then why were you afraid of us? The silence that followed was profound. Zethkar realized that Admiral Chen had just deconstructed the entire justification for their attack with a series of simple questions. Because, General Kexmore said slowly, we assume that any species capable of inspiring such warnings must be planning some form of aggression. And that assumption, Elder Morthak said sadly, is exactly why the warnings were necessary. Young species see strength and assume threat. They see capability and assume hostile intent. The warnings were meant to prevent exactly this kind of misunderstanding. Commander Velkar leaned forward. General, I've served alongside humans for 15 years now. Let me tell you what I've learned about their true nature. When the Zeridian plague threatened to wipe out the Kelos system, it was human medical teams who developed the cure. When the gravitational anomaly near Rigel started pulling ships into subspace, it was human engineers who found a way to stabilize it. When the Draconi Civil War left millions of refugees homeless, it was human colony ships that provided shelter. That's what humans do, Admiral Chen added. When they see a problem, they solve it. When they see suffering, they end it. When they see conflict, they find ways to prevent it from happening again. But, Commander Santos said, her voice carrying steel, when someone threatens human families, they respond with absolute commitment and unlimited resources. Not because they want to conquer, but because they want to ensure their children never have to face the same threat. The tactical display updated again, showing that human ships now filled the entire system. But Zethkar noticed something he had missed before. The ships weren't all military vessels. Mixed in with the warships were medical transports, supply vessels, even what appeared to be mobile workshops and fabrication units. You're not just here to fight, he realized. We're here to solve the problem, Admiral Chen confirmed. If fighting is necessary, we're prepared for it. But if there's a way to prevent future conflicts, we'll choose that instead. What are you proposing? General Kexmore asked. The same thing we proposed to the Morthak, to the Zeridians, to the dozen other species who have tested us over the centuries, Admiral Chen replied. Understanding. Elder Morthak nodded. The humans will offer your people the same choice they offered mine. You can continue on your current path, viewing every other species as a potential threat to be conquered or contained. Or you can learn to see the galaxy as humans do, as a community of species working together to build something better than any of us could achieve alone. And if we refuse? Then you'll discover why the warnings specifically mention that humans finish wars they didn't start, Commander Santos said quietly. The 800 ships you see here aren't our entire fleet, General. They're just the first wave. If this becomes a war instead of a learning opportunity, you'll face resources and capabilities that will make your current situation look like a friendly disagreement. Admiral Chen held up a hand. But it doesn't have to be a war, General. It can be the beginning of something much better. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Zethkar could hear only the quiet hum of his ship's systems and the subtle sounds of his crew at their stations. Finally, General Kexmore's voice came over the communicator. What would this understanding involve? Exchange programs, Admiral Chen explained. Cultural ambassadors, joint research projects, shared exploration missions. Your people have remarkable military discipline and strategic thinking, channeled toward exploration and scientific advancement instead of conquest. Those skills could unlock discoveries that benefit everyone. Like the Morthak did? Better than the Morthak did, Elder Morthak said proudly, because your species brings different strengths, different perspectives. The humans excel at integration, at finding ways for different capabilities to complement each other. Commander Velkar smiled. General, the human ship I serve on has a crew of 47 beings from 12 different species. We've mapped 7 star systems, established first contact with 3 new civilizations, and helped resolve 2 territorial disputes through diplomatic means. It's the most rewarding service I've ever experienced. You would trust us after we attacked your colony? General Kexmore asked. We trust people who are willing to learn from their mistakes, Admiral Chen replied. The attack on New Eden was based on fear and misunderstanding. If you're willing to address those root causes, then yes, we're willing to build something better together. Zethkar looked at his tactical display one more time. 800 human ships representing communities from across their space, all united by a single principle: protect human families and prevent future conflicts. It was the most impressive display of species-wide coordination he had ever witnessed. And they were offering to teach the Vextai how to achieve the same kind of unity for constructive purposes instead of destructive ones. Commander Zethkar, General Kexmore said quietly, what is your recommendation? Zethkar thought about the ancient warning carved in stone, about the assumptions that had led to this confrontation, about the choice now facing his people. Sir, he said finally, I recommend we learn why the warning exists instead of finding out what happens when we ignore it. Very well, the general replied after a long pause. Admiral Chen, the Vextai Empire accepts your proposal. We would like to understand. The relief that flooded through Zethkar was overwhelming. Around him, his crew seemed to collectively exhale for the first time in hours. Excellent, Admiral Chen said with a genuine smile. Commander Velkar will coordinate the initial cultural exchange. Elder Morthak has agreed to share the Morthak experience to help smooth the transition, and Captain Santos has volunteered to work with your military leaders to find constructive applications for Vextai's strategic capabilities. What about the warnings? Zethkar asked. Will they be updated? Elder Morthak's ancient face creased into what might have been a smile. Young Zethkar, the warnings will remain exactly as they are, because the message hasn't changed. Humans are exactly as dangerous as the warnings suggest. The difference is that now you understand why that danger exists and how to avoid triggering it. Leave humans alone, Admiral Chen said simply. Don't threaten their families. Don't attack their communities. Don't test their resolve. Do that, and you'll find them to be the most supportive allies you could ever ask for. And if other species ignore the warnings as we did, then they'll receive the same education you're about to receive, Commander Santos replied. Because that's what humans do. We learn, we understand, and we make sure the lessons are shared with anyone who needs to hear them. As Zethkar watched the human fleet begin to disperse, ships returning to their home systems after successfully resolving a potential galactic conflict without firing a shot in anger, he finally understood the true meaning of the ancient warnings. The warnings weren't meant to protect humans from other species. They were meant to protect other species from making the kind of mistake that would force humans to show exactly how dangerous they could be. And now, thanks to human patience and wisdom, the Vextai Empire would help ensure that future species learned the same lesson without having to experience the terror of facing 800 human ships responding to an attack on 10,000 farmers. The ancient warnings would remain carved in stone, as relevant today as they had been centuries ago, because some truths never changed. And the most important truth in the galaxy was simple. When it came to humans, it was always better to be their friend than their enemy.